Hello, good evening, everybody. Tonight we have Karen Perkins in tonight talking about all stories that she's written. We've got Sam, Scott, Karen, and myself, Shelley. So feel free, please, to just join in with the interview and ask any questions that you might have. So we're going to see who's on the chat. Say hello to anybody that's come in yet. Anybody, Scott?
So we get 3 watching so far, but there's no comments up, so just carry on, though.
So, hi Karen, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you ever so much for having me today.
Oh no, the pleasure's all yours. Thank you very much. As you know, a big fan of your books. They're absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
So tonight's just a bit about getting to know you a little bit better as a person and an author. Oh, is that so?
Hi, Joe.
What about your? Sorry, Scott. Who's that?
Oh, Joe Maben.
Oh, hello, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Go on, Karen.
So, how do? What was I going to say? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you managed to what got you into writing in the first place, Karen?
Yeah, well, it was a light in adversity, really, because I used to work as a financial advisor, very busy and traveling around the country. And I also did an awful lot of sailing, very keen and quite an extreme boat. And I would take that around the country and even into Europe. And in the European Championships, I knackered my back, basically, just completely overdid it. Although I did win the ladies' title. But when I came back, I was in a lot of pain, and that never went away. So that became a chronic pain condition, and I was stuck at home, which for me was horrendous because I was just always out. But in my searches to find answers for that, I found various complementary therapy courses and also a counselling course with learning to be a counsellor, where I had to write a journal and also a dream journal. And then I would just sit at home and I would just start writing, and I kind of filled a notebook. I thought, okay, need another one, got another one, filled another one. I thought, oh, I think I am actually writing a book, which was amazing because I've been a bookworm my whole life. When I was a child and I was lost, my mum wasn't worried. She knew I'd be in a corner somewhere completely lost, whether it was in Treasure Island or Narnia or off adventuring with the famous five. But it had never occurred to me that I could actually read a book until I was forced to, it didn't occur to me that I could write a book until I was forced to stop and just write. So that first book was Dead Reckoning, and that was a novel in the Valkyrie series, which was Caribbean Pirates. And that really helped me really indulge my love of sailing. So I couldn't sail anymore physically, but in my head, oh yes. And not only dinghies, I was in a tall ship, and I did teach myself how to sail a tall ship. Brilliant. And that was wonderful. And it was therapy as well.
Yeah.
And so from when I realized that I had written a book, then I decided, right, I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to take this seriously. I started doing some creative writing courses, read every book I could find about how to write, how to edit, how to publish, everything I could get my hands on, and started editing as well. So connecting with other authors or want to be authors and critiquing each other's work. And it took me, that first book, it took me 9 months to write, and it took me 5 or 6 years to rewrite and edit to make sure that I got it right. But then that was it. I just could not stop. I'd let the characters into my head, and they have stayed. Thank goodness they have stayed, and they are multiplying.
And it's good in a way because obviously, as you said, you couldn't get out sailing anymore as you're back. But it would have kind of your imagination, what you would imagine yourself doing on the boats out in the sea. You could actually just put it down in paper and just imagine you were there anyway. And so
I was mentally, I was there. I was on the sea. I was on those ships, and I was sailing them. And I mean, you talk about imagination. When I told my family that I'd written a book, the first comment was, "Well, you do have the imagination for it, Karen." Yeah, I do actually. Yes.
Help. So, that's it's really good. So that was your Valkyrie series of
Yes.
books that you had got it.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the main one, Dead Reckoning, and I submitted it to a competition for the Dyslexia magazine, which is a writing magazine for women writers, and it's a very well respected one. And it was their first novel writing competition, and I knew it wasn't quite ready. I thought, well, there's nothing to be lost by entering it.
Yeah.
So I did so, and it was longlisted, which just amazed me. I think they had a couple of thousand entries, and yes, the long list is a long list, but it was a pirate book for a women's magazine, and it wasn't ready. And that then really thought, well, hang on, actually, I can do this, a bit more work, and then yes, I can put it out there, and people may actually enjoy what I have to write. So it was a big turning point for me.
Well, that's fantastic that you to have the belief that you actually can go ahead and make a career out of this, and it gives you the kind of boost to go and publish more books.
Yes.
So quite a big jump between the kind of nautical side to then moving on to the kind of the hauntings and side of the books that you were writing.
Yes.
What got you into
I think with the Valkyrie series, in a way, I was processing what I was going through, and it is a kind of therapy for me. And the Valkyrie books were really about the pain. So there's an awful lot of injuries in the book, and an awful lot of battles, and quite a lot of pain inflicted on each other, as they did in those times. But then my mind turned to Thrushcross Reservoir, which is where I learnt to sail and is somewhere very dear to me. And the character of Janet, who first came into being in The Haunting of Thor's Cross. I think that book, because I think I was very isolated at the time just because of the health situation. And it got to thinking, actually, what if I feel isolated now when I've got computers and telephones and television? I can pick up the phone and call my mum and dad. I can ring a taxi if I really need to get somewhere and chuck a few painkillers down and manage it. What would it have been like to have been isolated when it was really isolating, back in a Yorkshire Moors village, miles away from anywhere, where you're so dependent on the people around you for company? And if that village turns against you as well, and that's where Janet came from. And it links in as well to an old find that I made as a child, exploring what we called the haunted house with my sister. And that was an old ink pot, which is this one, if I can see it there, which was built into a dry stone wall. And I knew when I found it, when I was 10 or 11, I knew I would write a story one day. And it took 30 years, but yes, I did in the end. And I'm sure Janet's real. She is. Well,
I was just going to say that it took Janet 250 years for her story to be told. So for you, 30 years isn't that much, really. But that book definitely was. I was hooked for this for this very start. And just hearing you talking about like the inkwell, you actually have the inkwell, so that is
it's one of the few things. It's I've never lost it. It's wherever I've moved to, it's always come with me. Always, yes.
And this Janet subject is she is real. Sorry, Scott. Hello, everybody.
Turn of the comments for a wee second or two, if that's all right, Karen. Just say we've got Joanne, we've got Joe Maven in, Joanne Tiffany, Sean Pages in. Hope you're feeling better, Sean. I know he was in hospital last night. Andy Murphy is in, Sarah's in, Robin Pratt's in, Carol and Thomas. There's a comment for you there. Karen the Pendle Work Blog is here.
Hi, Thomas. Hi. That is a fantastic resource. There's posts in the Pendle Witch blog are fantastic. Thank you.
Need to check that out.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Brilliant.
Carol, I'll sort of get your name wrong, Carol. I do apologise. Hernandez. I think I've got that right. Hopefully I've got it right. Which is Andy Murphy's in. Andy Murphy's got a comment for you as well. I suppose if I get step in writing it down, we all probably have a book in our heads, but just don't take the step of writing stuff down.
Yeah, the hardest thing is starting. If you can start, that's half the hurdle with a lot of things in life.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got a book that you want to write down, the first chapter is the hardest one to write. And I mean, I approach it now. I think a lot of editors, or the most common editing comment can often be, forget the first chapter, start at chapter 2. So I kind of write my first chapter earlier than I want to start, knowing that I'm going to cut it. So that takes the pressure off then. And it doesn't matter if it's rubbish, because it's just the trigger to start the rest of the book.
Well, I'll let you into a secret. I started writing a book last lockdown, and I thought, this is, I'll just kind of write a kind of journal kind of thing through lockdown. And then as I looked at it, I mean, I've done a lot in that first lockdown. And I thought it's not actually that bad. It's not half bad. But I think definitely it would be no a full book. It would be like a chapter or a few chapters in amongst a full story, I reckon. But it's just really getting nerves to start writing it down. So Robin.
That's it. Because quite often we're our own worst enemy, and we think, well, there's no point because it's not going to be good enough. Well, big secret. It's not such a secret, really. The first draft is never good enough. That's why it's a first draft. The main point of the first draft is just to write it down and get the story down. And as you're writing, the characters will become more and more real. And they'll often dictate as well how the story goes, and they'll keep giving you a kick up the what's it to make sure that you keep writing them, as Janet does to me. And you start at step 1 and then you move on to step 2 and you keep going.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how long it takes. As I say, that first book of mine took 6-7 years to write. It doesn't matter. It just write it. And I have to say that first books don't usually take that long. I did take a long time about it.
So did you take a bit of time? Did you try and write a bit and then reread it and then think, no, I'm not happy with that, and then scrap and redo? Or do you just write lots and then try and piece it all together?
Well, I find as I'm on book 11 now, and I found the first book was completely freestyle. And then it needed an awful lot of work to really knock it into shape. And as time has gone on, I'm planning and structuring them more and more and more. So I'm doing an awful lot more preparation work, which then saves the time at the end. But it is different for each book, because I'm actually writing 2 at the moment. One is very much historical fiction and has to stick to the facts, and that's the next Pendle Witch book about the main trial with Demdike and Chattox and their families. And I'm also writing the next Haworth book, which is the historical timeline there is set at the same time as the Pendle Witches, but it's purely fictional, so I can be a lot freer there. So there's the Pendle Witch book is a lot more structured because it has to fit in with what is with what is known about what happened to those women and the people around them. So it does depend on the book, but I do find the more planning that you do, as long as it's not too detailed, because the characters will change the plan. And I'll let you into a secret. The character is always right. There's no point in arguing with them because they will win and they will be right.
I think we're just going to read a couple of comments here now. Scott, I'll let you carry on with that.
Laura's in as well, and say hi to Laura. She was late, but we'll excuse Laura. And Liz Smith and Simon Robertson's here as well. So how do you turn writing a story at school, start, middle, end, and 2 or 3 pages into a book with 100. No offence, Andy, I don't understand that one, but maybe Karen can understand that.
I think the thing there is, don't worry about the book that you're writing. Just worry about the chapter that you're writing, or the paragraph that you're writing, or just the scene that you're writing. If you think about the whole thing while you're writing, it gets too overwhelming and the fear's too much, and it becomes think, well, I can't do that. That's far too big. But if you just write one scene at a time and just focus on one scene at a time and just have faith, the rest will come. If the characters are real and the characters are right, they will come and they will drive the story for you.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, then just think more about the characters. And I find that asking myself questions helps. Whenever I get stuck, whenever I think, well, what happens now? Where do I go from here? I write the question down. What happens next? Big question mark. And then the subconscious works on it and the answer comes. And do have a pen and paper by your bed, because the answer quite often comes when you're near sleep. And if you don't write it down, it's gone.
That's the way. By the time morning comes.
Let's say she's finished on to Thor's Cross Blood, that she will be reading more.
Thank you, Liz. That's wonderful.
I know you're talking, Karen, when you say, write ideas and that. I mean, many years ago, I actually tried my hand at writing. I used to drive trucks, so you spend a lot of time on your own, and I kept getting these stories in my head, and it was actually my ex-sister-in-law. She was a writer, and she said, I was talking to her one day, she says, write something. So I started writing, and I wrote a whole kind of screenplay. I never went anywhere, ended up in a drawer. And then I started writing short stories and stuff like that. And I did really enjoy it, but I haven't gone back quite a few years. But the thing I just want to get back to when you were talking about, when you were writing about, when your imagination takes you to that place that you're writing about, for instance, like the ship. I felt the same way, and I enjoyed it because you're in control of these characters. You decide.
No, I'm not.
What you're going to do. So if they're made up kind of thing, I felt, I could decide when somebody was going to bed or when they were going to get up kind of thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, the characters rarely do as they're told, because they become almost real people. And I mean, the first few chapters, yes, you're dictating what they're doing. But then as they become real, I'm writing and I'm doing I'm trying to follow the plan. And quite often I may just have a few chapter notes and I'm padding it out and then free writing it. And I'm thinking, there's no way she'd do that. Absolutely no way. So then it all has to change. And I think going back to the pirate book, the biggest change there was I had one character who was on the ship the whole way through, on the main ship. And then in chapter 2, the captain chucked him overboard. I thought, well, now what do I do? Who's going to do all his stuff? He's gone.
No,
you're not in control of them, I'm afraid. You need to let go.
At the start out, you're making up these characters. But I was making up these just characters, people. And you think, well, what kind of lifestyle they're going to have, age-wise, job-wise, everything. So you kind of felt, well, it's up to me what to do for a kind of living sort of thing. But then as I went on and on, I mean, it took me, I don't know how long, it took me weeks and weeks. I found that these people actually started to become real.
Yes.
Real living people. Even though they were up here and on a bit of paper, they did actually become real people.
Yes.
And you started to worry about them and stuff.
Yes.
What was going to happen next, even though you were writing the story.
Yes, and I find myself apologising to them as I'm writing the awful things I do to them. But at that point, when the characters become real, that's when the magic happens. That really is when the magic happens, and the story flows and it becomes all encompassing and you get lost in it and in the zone, and that's wonderful. That really is wonderful. So you definitely need to get back to that screenplay and those short stories, Scott.
You do get lost. I found myself.
Can you imagine what these stories would be like? I'm so sorry, but I think I would just need to pay for them just to to be entertained.
I was going to college at the same time. I was doing media studies at college, and part of media studies was creative writing. And, you know, I took some of them in there, and the lecturer read them, and she actually said they were quite good. You know, I'm not sort of copy, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I did find myself, after work, I'd be straight up the stairs. I had a desk, you walk up the stairs, and I'd be straight up the stairs and get, you know, start writing, because you all day you're thinking, and you just want to get home, and you want to get it down on paper, you know, and get it written out.
Yes, absolutely. And it's opening your mind to characters that kind of links into the paranormal as well, and being open to your mind and channeling them and putting them on paper and bringing the real character, the personalities and the spirit through, really.
As you're talking about the character and what you're saying there, Karen, talking about Janet, she's quite a kind of a strong character, and you've just mentioned no long ago about her still being here. Do you feel as though she's became part of you as much as like you've created her? And you can. Yeah,
I do wonder actually if she's. Yeah, I do wonder if actually she is real, because obviously I did find her at that haunted house. And what is really strange in the cover, if you can, how can I do? You can see in there the little figure in the window.
Yeah,
that's what I saw as a child, and sent me running back down the hill away just after I'd found the inkwell, and I did not tell the cover designer that.
That's I love that. Ooh, I love that.
Yes. So I did have a bit of a start when I saw that on the cover.
And I know that is so creepy. But I do know on one of your pages somebody posted a picture. Was it a man and a lady standing on a bridge? And it looked like there was a kind of I don't know, a lady behind them.
On my book group page, it's Books by Karen Perkins, and it's a group, and we obviously chat the books, but and also things spooky and connected. And one of the members, lovely Kate Gray, her family, she had connections in the village that Thor's Cross is based on, that is now under the waters of Thor's Cross Reservoir. And she very kindly posted a couple of pictures. I think it's a mother and a brother on one of the bridges that features in the story. And yes, you can almost see the Janet cover face behind them on that bridge. I think
that's right.
If you haven't seen the cover, I'll try it again. So you can almost see this face behind them on the bridge, and also see a hand and a quill, which is really strange. So yeah, it is. I mean, the place, if you ever go to what I now call Janet Country, it's Thrush Cross Reservoir in Blubberhouses, which is such a wonderful name. Do visit the reservoir, because it really is a special place. It always has been in my heart. And I know even as a teenager, if I was, with all the teenage angst, I would take myself there and just sit quietly on the shores of that reservoir and just calm. So it's, and a lot of people say the same kind of things. It's a very spiritual place as well.
One of my go-to places now after that book.
Sorry, Shani, I was.
No, you're okay, Karen. I'm just saying it's one of my go-to places now. I have literally got to go there now, because just listening to your story just kind of fascinates me. And to be able to see the reservoir, just what you were saying earlier on about the reservoir, and there is a scene in about that at the beginning of the book, and it almost feels like it was just you. But speaking to you now, it was like before it was like the character, but now I can sense that was kind of yourself.
Yeah, as well. The prologue to The Haunting of Thor's Cross is the real story of how I found the inkwell. So with my sister daring me to go up to the haunted house on my own. So and then and climbing the dry stone wall, it was all tumbling down, and the inkwell was built into the middle of it, and that fascinated me. And then I I was quite scared, and I went closer to the haunted house and then saw that in the window, and that was it. I just ran past. I didn't care what name she called me. I ran.
Oh, I totally recommend anybody that hasn't read that book. It's definitely got to be written, to be read, actually. Fantastic. So, yep, Scott, on
Can
you go.
I just get back in the comments, because we're getting a few comments, a couple of questions. Just before, the sort of run away. So Robin says she's going to be writing 2 books. She's gone to Para-Uni. She's going to be writing 2 books. Paranormal Experience, the second is her life story. She's a very interesting lady, as Robin. So, when she does the books, I would say definitely have a peek. Donna Parker.
That sounds really interesting.
She's a really interesting lady. She read 4 of your books in the last week. She can't stop because she loves it.
Thank you.
How you read all the books, how quick you get through them, because you kind of put them down.
Brilliant.
That's the kind of book I like. That's the kind of book I like. I like to be able, you get sunk in and you just kind of stop page turning. That's my type of book.
It's quite hard, because I don't feel like that with every book. So the fact that I've been like that with pretty much every one of the books that I've read, Karen, is kudos to you as an author.
You're making me blush.
Steve says hello, and John's here as well. So hi guys. John's here. So you would have been classed as a pantser, but now the rest of your books you have written, you're a prepper.
Yes, pretty much done. Yes, the first book completely seat of my pants. No plan. I didn't even realise I was writing a book until I was most of the way through it. And then when I tried to edit it, I think I had to rewrite it 3 or 4 times to really get it into shape. And I realised, and it was the last rewrite that I structured it and I planned it. And then it fell into place. So, yes, I learned, for me at least, to prep it. Not in too much detail, though. So it would be I'd have an overview and then different parts and a structure of where it was going. But there's no point in going into too much detail, because the characters then take over and will take me in a different direction at times. So it needs to be flexible. But yes, definitely moved from pantser to prepper.
Yeah, so it would be hard to make characters in your head, and our personalities, events would take great talent. Well, easier for me, as I lived already what I'm writing, my life story and paranormal experiences.
I actually find it the other way around. I find it harder to write about my life experiences than I do the fiction.
Which is strange, isn't it? Because you'd think that you would be able to write more easily.
Yeah. So I mean, some things do come out in metaphor. For example, again, just going back to that first pirate book, I was stopping smoking when I was writing it. And I didn't realise until later that the baddie pirates, their initials were B&H, which was the brand I was kicking. And it took me years before I realised that. But I think I am I think obviously chronic pain and the fibromyalgia has dictated much of the last 25 years for me, even though it got me into writing, which is fantastic. There are massive silver lining. But I'm only now really starting to write more disabled characters in the books as well. And I want to start doing that more, especially I think with the Howarth books. I think there is a bit in Parliament of Rooks, both Martha, the historical character, and also Verity, one of the modern characters. And that will expand in future books as well. So, but I do find it much, much harder to write real life than I do fiction. So good on you, Robin. That's fantastic.
I think, from my own point of view, what I was saying about the writing the last year with the book I was starting to write last year, like my imagination, I've got no imagination whatsoever. So if it comes to writing a book, it would have to be through personal experience, because that's all I've really got to go on, because my imagination is not that great. I mean, I'm good at poems, but
start and see where it takes you. You may be surprised.
No, you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Few tips for a great author, and I'll be away. Right, Scott, is there any more comments on the
Robin says, although really I would think the opposite interesting for sure.
Yeah. We're all different. Yeah.
Thanks for all the comments, guys.
You're welcome, Robin. Keith Robinson's in as well, says hi, Karen. It is an amazing thing.
Another author.
Imagination. I'll give you a quick example. I'm from Glasgow, and there was one time I used to spend a lot of time walking about the city. One time I was sitting at a place called St. Square, and I'd walked from the Mitchell Library, which is kind of top end of the town, right down. It takes about 20, 30 minutes or something. Shelley would know what I'm talking about. And it's full of just people running about, you know, maybe on their lunch hour, trying to get shop and try to control their kids and what have you. Mm. And so I sat down in St. Square. I was just sitting there, I was just looking about, and I spotted this one guy, and he was just walking along. He wasn't in a hurry, and he was trying to light a cigarette. And he must have had maybe a good a dozen attempts at lighting this cigarette. And, you know, he just stood there, lit it as calm as it, and just kept walking. And he kind of stood out in the crowd because everybody else was, you know, the usual hustle centre. But this one person just kind of stuck out to me. He just wasn't kidding. He knew he would get there in the end. And I went home and I wrote a short story called, I think it was called The Way to Be. You know, it's the best way to be. It's just laid back. Yes. And so it's really amazing how sometimes something can just pop in your head. You can know.
Inspiration just strikes.
Exactly.
And the best thing to do is people watching is fantastic. And people will, whether it's a person who stands out or something somebody says which you take out of context, or a mannerism, or something that just strikes a chord and lights a fire, and then that just spirals. Yeah,
it was just this very total laid back attitude of caring, you know. Yeah. It was a case of, I'm lighting this cigarette and that's all that matters just now. And
he did, he got there in the end. Yeah.
He did, and then he just strolled off where everybody else, as I say, was running about on their lunch or whatever it is they were doing. He's Oscar, you know. He was just doing his and that always stuck with me. That every time, I don't go to Glasgow very often, but every time I go to Glasgow, and I'm always reminded of that guy. I don't know why, but he's stuck up here.
He really did make an impression, didn't he?
He did, it was just, you know, you would have to, it was one of these times you'd need to be there, you know, and just have noticed him, you know.
Yeah. You sat there and observed, and you've seen all these people just rushing about, and then you get this one man, it just goes against the grain. And that is a powerful thing anyway, isn't it?
It is.
It's the joy of people watching as well.
Goes the other way.
I like watching when you see somebody and you see the expression on their face and it just suddenly changes, you know, and you know that they've just had a thought because nothing around them's changed. Nothing's happened around them. And it's just in their own wee bubble that they've had an idea or remember something, and its whole expression just totally changes.
It's crazy. You can read a lot about someone with their facial expressions and their body language when they're obviously in deep thought, when they're stomping about the city or stomping about the town. It's great.
Yes, and they don't realise it shows on the face. And and I will quite often. I'll go on research trips. I'll just usually on my own, and so staying in a local hotel and just sitting in the bar and quietly writing. And I will. People just, as you say, as Scott's just described, will just spark some interest, and you just write out a character just based around that. Just as an artist will sometimes sketch people, it's a sketch in words, and it's
like an artist.
Yes, definitely watch people and sitting on the bus and just listening to all the conversations going around you. That's another good tip when we can, of course.
you get quite a few of them. You know that I've sat in a Glasgow bus for quite some time, but you know, memory serves right. You get quite a good few conversations, especially in Glasgow buses. You know, they can be quite funny at times and kind of near to the bone, shall we say? I mean, but I've got a question for you, Karen. I mean, Pendle Witches. Obviously, you're Pendle Witches quite a wee bit, and then we're doing Pendle next month as well. What first sparked your interest in Pendle?
It was, well, from a young age. I think it was Ainsley's Lancashire Witches book, first of all. And as soon as I heard the story, it just really sparked something in me, just to try and understand why a community could turn against some of its own like that. And even you were talking about the haunting of Thor's Cross before. Janet's name came from the Pendle Witches, because there was a Janet who was an accuser, a Janet who was a victim, and a Janet who was a witness, and that name just really came with it, and that's where her name came from. And of course, at the time, I didn't realise I would then be writing about the Pendle Witches themselves. But there we go. And their story just fascinates me. And I started with a couple of the smaller trials rather than go straight into the main well-known one, because I think these women suffered just as much. Yet they're not really known about, and they're not talked about, and what was done to them isn't really remembered. So certainly not in the same way that Demdike and the Devis family, and also Chattox and her family, and as well the people around them are remembered and talked about. And I think people forget that actually that there was more to them. There were a lot of people suffered at that time, and in that year.
That was going to be my next question. We done Witch Week. Was it last week?
Yeah.
We done Witch.
Yeah.
Shows how good my memory is. I can't remember what our own channel does week to week. You know, that's shocking. I was going to ask you that. You know, obviously you get the Pendle Witches, but as you just said, there was many other witch trials. You know, from north to south. But the Pendle Witch trial seems to be the one that has captured more, and even though it's 400-500 years down the line, people still flock there. You know, and I'm not just talking in the UK, I'm talking about world, but you know, people come from all over the world, flock to this one spot, whereas they don't flock to, like say, North Berwick or Essex, you know, places where there was other big trials. What do you think why do you think the Pendle Witch trials sparked such interest?
Oh, what a question. You know, I wonder if it's because it was Lancashire and not very long after the gunpowder treason. So the country had already had this massive, the gunpowder plot. Obviously, Guy Fawkes came from my neck of the woods, just down the road, actually, in Scotton, in North Yorkshire. And there was another of the main guys was Lancashire. And I think, and the Lancashire magistrates, they had something to prove. And there was the threat of blowing up Lancaster Castle as well. Made up, not made up, who knows? So I think it was partly that. So that gave it a lot of prominence at the time. The fact that Thomas Potts wrote it all down and published it at the behest of the judges. So the information was readily available. And then that trial and using children as witnesses as well, that had an effect even at the Salem trials. Those testimonies were allowed because of Janet Device and Grace Sowerbutt, and that law that children were allowed to testify. And I think it was more about timing, because obviously James VI of Scotland became James I of England, and he brought it all together. He published his demonology. He made the Witchcraft Act. He upped the penalties and the definitions, and it just became more. It just became more and more and more, and it was a culmination. But I don't think the Pendle Witch trials would have happened without the Berwick Witch trials. And it's almost there was a foundation, and it just escalated and escalated. But actually, the short answer is actually probably Thomas Potts' book.
I know there's Joe Lancaster was also a fair part of the country at that time.
Yes.
Hi, Frankie P, thanks for coming in, buddy. I mean, Thomas Potts' books are a day-by-day account of the trials and what have you, but I know there's a few people who do dispute it. You know, they say it's not true, that it was made up. But I don't see how that could be, you know, made up, basically, if it's the only written record of the actual trials.
It can, if you think about things, there can be different opinions and different views on the same event, and it can be viewed with different coloured glasses. And I mean, he starts out as they are the worst feared witches. How can I put it? The language used is language that the gentry would have used, not what the common folk, what the peasants, what the beggars would have used. They weren't allowed any kind of defence whatsoever. So it was only the magistrates, who were the learned men, who were speaking. And the jury, of course, was only of men of the gentry class. So it was the trials were very much weighted against the people being tried. They had no chance, really.
No, they never. But one more question, and then I'll give you back to Shelley. Sorry, Shelley, for railroading in, doll. I mean,
No, you're fine. You're absolutely fine.
You've got the Pendle Witchery, but you get the paranormal side. I know there's hundreds of teams been down, you know, all swamped the place and what have you. Do you think the witches are still, pardon the pun, hanging around? You know.
That is a really good question. I think if they are, it's because of what was done to them and because they're being called. And it really gets me that 400 years later, they're still being hunted as witches. 400 years after their death, they are still being hunted as witches. And I hope they're not there. I really hope they're not there. I hope they've moved on and found some peace.
Yeah.
That's it. They are still being hunted as witches, those people.
Yeah.
You know, I dare say they might have that. I mean, I'm not a great expert on witchcraft by any means, but I dare say some of them dabbles, you know, with herbs and stuff like that, you know, different bits and pieces, but
so did everyone. Even the magistrate would have had a herb garden for medicines. It was normal at that time. That was the only kind of medicine they had, really. So there would have been old beliefs. It would have been some of the old pagan beliefs and chants and practices that had been handed down through the family. Would have been some of the old Catholic rites that they were used to doing that had been handed down through the family, because they weren't educated in any way, shape or form, just through the family and the ancestors. And then suddenly there was a massive change, complete about Volte-Foss, sorry. And they suddenly had to believe different things and say things in a different way. And why would they? Because they've done this for centuries and this has always worked. And anyway, people believe us and they'll take us seriously and they'll hire us to heal the sick cow and they'll give us some money if we threaten to curse them. So it all depends on the definition of witchcraft. And at that time, the definition of a witch was decided by James VI, James I. And it was purely that, yeah.
Definitely one last question, and then you're all Shelley's. I promise Shelley, the last question. The Good Friday at Malcolm Tower, how much do you think that swayed the trial? You know,
sorry, say that again.
The Good Friday meeting at Malcolm Tower that was meant to take place.
Yes, I think that was very convenient. That was very convenient. They had them all together, or a lot of people together. There was Good Friday with a stolen sheep roasted. So feasting on Good Friday, that in itself would have been a hanging offence in some of those magistrates and judges' minds. And anybody who wasn't there, they could put them there. And of course, the more they delved into it, the more they looked into the history of the place, and then they found things that helped them. I mean, some pretty horrible, gruesome things, I have to say. But the Malkin Tower meeting was, well, I hate to say, but it was a godsend for the magistrates and Roger Knoll. It really was.
Sorry, Shelley. Sorry for railroading your interview, doll.
Oh, you're absolutely fine. I was like a greyhound waiting to get out the traps there just to start again. I'm only kidding on. I'm only kidding on. So, well, we've got a question. Joe Mabin, to comply with the religion, they were incredibly poor-stricken people that did anything they could to get by, but they knew what they could do. That's right, through generations they learned.
Yes, you're right, Joe. Absolutely. And people feared them because it was a superstitious time as well, and no doubt they would have had remedies and also knowledge of not so nice things and poisons and all the rest of it that they could use. And if they could get a few pennies by scaring people, then why not? They didn't have much power at all, so they did what they had to do to survive. They were just surviving, trying to.
That's right. So, is there any more comments? I've got a couple of more questions to ask Karen, and we're possibly going to get there. We all right just now?
Yes, you fire in, Shelley, fire in.
Fantastic. So you do a great job on your stories, the ones that I've read anyway, about bringing, and you tend to kind of bring the past into the present day, which is what we're always, which as a team is what we're all about, really. Yes. Is that something that you're interested in as well? Is that, do you try to do that as much as you can in your stories?
Very much. Yes, very much so. Because the past shapes the present. The landscapes we live in, they were shaped by the people, generations and centuries past. And the families, the connections, it's all shaped by the past. And however much we try to let go of it, the past never goes away. It always influences us. Whether small ways, large ways, but it always influences. It's there in the subconscious, in a psychology point of view. Right. It's there in the physical, in where we live, why the land looks the way it looks. And I'm fascinated by the local landscapes as well, and the history of the land that I live in, as well as the people that lived in it.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And that's exactly what we're all about. Yeah. It kind of gives me an idea, like, this might sound silly and it might sound a wee bit off the wall and wacky, but it is like having deja vu, but having, you know how you think you've experienced that before?
Yes.
With your stories, you're able to tell the story and why they're having the feelings and emotions in the present day. So it's kind of like a constant flow of deja vu, if that sounds, that's how I was thinking about it earlier on.
That's interesting, actually. That's very interesting, because that happens to me a lot, and I quite often remember the future. Something happens and I can remember it already happening, but for everybody else it hasn't happened yet. And I know what's going on. And so so time, you've got me thinking now.
Well, go back to a comment that Robin Pratt made earlier on about like the gift that you've got, because obviously you've got a kind of gift there somewhere, because you're experiencing.
I have had some experiences, yes.
And stuff like that. So it's maybe something you could possibly go and see about. I mean, I would love a past life reading.
Regression.
Yes.
I would love that. And sometimes maybe that would help you on your journey as well going forwards. Maybe give you something else to write about.
Yes, maybe. I mean, you never know. Them. I may already be writing about them. You never know.
So,
I mean, certainly have had experiences through the years, yeah.
And I mean, well, I don't know. I think we all have had experiences. So what got your name, Scott? Sam, Scott, and myself. I was going to say him up the corner.
You see what this is what I need to deal with every day. There's never ends, 7 days a week, constant.
Scott, next time Karen comes in, you're going to have to get yourself a nice hat.
I'm going to get myself a nice hat.
Next time Karen comes on, you're going to have to get yourself a nice hat if you're going to sit beside her.
I can't. Imagine forgetting my name. It's not a big complicated name.
It's just kind of left there. I was too busy thinking about deja vu.
Well, thanks for that, Jeffrey.
Karen, somebody asked earlier, do you ever dream about your characters that you write about?
Yes, I do. And if they come into my dreams, it's normally when I'm in the zone, when I've got to that stage where the characters are taking over. And yeah, they can come into the dreams. And I do have a big pad and pen by the side of my bed, a kind of pen which will write upside down, and a very large pad so that I can scroll it out so I'm not writing on top of each other in the dark. There are times as well when I can almost lucid dream. And I start thinking about a scene, and then they kind of take over, and I'm asleep, but I'm watching it happen. And I do also try and do that at the beginning of the book. So at the moment, when I'm going to sleep, I'm dreaming, or I'm thinking or imagining Roger Noel approaching Reed Hall as it would have been back in 1612, and how the hall would have looked, what he was wearing, the landscape, and then inside, and just take it from there. And even if I don't remember the dreams, they're there in the subconscious, and I'm sure they do come out. Yes.
Maybe it's deja vu. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
So we'll go on. I just want to talk a wee bit about the actual kind of where they are, the books. So just to give a wee bit of kudos and a wee bit of praise, like, because all your books have made the top 50 in Kindle, haven't they?
Well, they've all been bestsellers, so they've been at the top of bestselling of categories on Amazon. The most successful has been Parliament of Rooks, which made number 21 in the UK Kindle store, which was amazing. And The Haunting of Thor's Cross actually took me over the pond to Manhattan for my first literary award, which was really amazing, especially when I started writing it. I couldn't leave the house. So they've done amazingly well, and people do seem to enjoy them, which is just fantastic. It really is, because it's scary putting your books out there. It really is, and I'm almost emotional just how the feedback that I've had back from people, how much they enjoy them, and thank you all so much for not only buying them but spending the time with them.
I think with my own experience, you do. For us as a reader, we can invest so much in the characters as well. So for everything you're putting through with the characters that are in the book and the story, we kind of feel as though we're invested in that, and we're there, just like a wee ghost watching them at the sidelines, like the wee spirit, like nobody can see, like the Christmas Carol kind of thing. They're watching the Ghost of Christmas Past, and you just get really, really invested in these characters in the books. I can't praise the stories enough.
They're real.
Yeah, they feel, and obviously because a lot it's based on true people or true places and stuff like that. It's a lot of it is when you can identify with the people or identify with the places. I think it helps to do that.
Yes.
So deja vu is actually your intuition telling you something.
Yes.
There you go.
Could well be right, Joe. Yes. Yeah.
Bless Karen. I will definitely be looking into your books. Definitely, Robin, they're 100% great.
Thank you, Robin, and I yours as well.
And that'll just lead me on to you were going to actually do a little reading for everybody, weren't you, on one of your books, Karen?
Yes.
And I think just now would be a great time to actually maybe try and do that, and it'll let everybody see. So sit back, everybody. Definitely worth getting. The books are fantastic.
So I'll read from Parliament of Rooks. I'll just read the prologue. So it's Haworth, March 1838. Martha hitched up the bundle strapped to her front. Satisfied baby John was secure, she grasped the handle and began to haul the full bucket up the well shaft. John barely mewed in protest at the violent, rhythmic action, already used to the daily routine, and Martha pushed thoughts of the future out of her mind. Her firstborn was sickly, and she was surprised he'd survived his first 2 months. He was unlikely to live much longer. She stopped to rest, her body not yet fully recovered from the rigours of the birthing, then bent her back to her task once more. She had too much to do to indulge in a lengthy respite. Once she had the water and had scrubbed their rooms clear of coal dust and soot, she'd be up to the Weavers' Gallery to start on the day's pieces. She stopped again, took a couple of deep breaths, then coughed as fetid air filled her struggling lungs. Bracing herself, she continued her quest for water, cursing the dry February that had caused the well to run so low. At last she could see the bucket, water slopping with each jerk of the rope. Reaching over, she grasped the handle and filled her ewers. Adjusting baby John once more, she bent, lifted, and embarked on the trudge homeward. "Blasted slaughterman," she cried, just catching herself as she slipped on the blood pouring down the alley past the King's Arms and onto Main Street. She'd forgotten it was market day tomorrow. Slaughterhouse was busy today. Another deep breath, another cough, and Martha trudged on, the bottom of her skirt soaked in blood. She heard the snort of the horses and the trundle of cartwheels on packed but sticky earth just in time, and was already jumping out of the way before the drayman's warning shout reached her. "Damn and blast thee," she screeched as she landed in the midden and next the King's Arms, which stank of rotten meat and offal from the slaughterhouse next door. She clambered back to her feet, checked baby John was unharmed, then noticed her empty ewers lying in the muck beside her. Covered in blood and filth, she ran after the dray, cursing at the top of her voice, then stopped. That wasn't the drayman sat atop his cart of barrels. It was a trap carrying a passenger. She watched the carriage come to a halt by the church steps, and a jealous rage surged in the pit of her stomach as the passenger alighted. Emily Bronte had returned to Haworth.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Really good.
Thank you.
Robin says, goosebumps already.
Excellent. That's what I like to see.
Oh.
The way you tell the story as well, with you reading it, it sucks you in. I could listen to you for hours.
Oh, thank you.
That,
Like this hour has literally just flew in.
Yeah. Ricardo, do you have any audible books? Man, you read your books perfectly
Oh,
aloud.
thank you, Robin. Yes, they are all on Audible, and some of them I do narrate myself. I think Janet was the first one I narrated, then plus the two Pendle Witch stories, Murder by Witchcraft and Divided by Witchcraft.
Brilliant.
And I'll be narrating the next ones as well.
Fantastic.
See, Robin, she's head up with the Paragunity, which we're members of. If you give me the links, I can put them in I'll put them in the Paragunity page, Robin, for you. I can post them on their Facebook page. So everybody can click into them and go and have a look, go and have a listen. Go and have a look.
I could have a look as well, but
well, you can have a look as well, look, listen, can click onto the links, and we'll put them up on our Facebook page as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
So that
I certainly recommend them. And obviously a lot of these stories, that what you've just read there, is based on like the past on the Parliament of Rooks. And
It
then
is, yes.
Isn't it?
You're
Yeah,
being
so
told to
it's
carry on, Karen.
Yeah.
People are saying, carry on, this is great.
Okay. I can keep talking. Yeah, well, that one's set in Haworth, and it compares the horror that Haworth was in the 1840s when the Brontes lived there, to the modern day Haworth as a tourist centre, and just the different ways life was viewed as well, how precious it was back in the 1840s, and now it can be a little bit more frivolous, shall we say. Oh, just seeing Robin's message there. Thank you, Robin.
That's lovely, Robin. Well, there you go. You've got another fan. That's great. Fantastic. So, what about the paranormal? You know, we obviously that's your thing. And I know you were saying when you went to the house, you seen the image of the girl lady up in the window. Is that the only kind of paranormal experience you can definitely say that you've had?
Oh no, there've been a few. There've been a few over the years. I mean, even as a child, I had an awful lot of imaginary friends who really didn't seem imaginary at all. They were real, and they came to visit me. And if something had happened I didn't understand, they would tell me and explain, which was really difficult for my parents, because I never actually went to them and told them what was going on, because somebody had already explained it to me. And there's a couple of experiences. What I used to work in the Boar's Head in Ripley, which is one of the most haunted villages in the country. And the Boar's Head, it was an old coaching inn. It used to be called the Star Inn. Then it was a private house. It had just been converted back to a hotel again. And there were a few ghost stories around the place, and a lot around Ripley Castle as well, which it was connected to. And I was working on reception, and it had only just opened. It was in the first year, so it was very quiet. There were no guests. It was in the middle of winter, so I was just going around all the rooms, just filling up the stationery trays, making sure there was paper and leaflets and pens and all the rest of it. I did the main hotel, no problem, and then I went out to what used to be the old stable block, and at the far end there was keepers' cottages, which is still there. And I went upstairs, and I went into one of the rooms at one end of the landing upstairs, and I just walked in and went, oh God, what an awful room. And then I looked again, I thought, no, it's not, it's gorgeous. And they were all bespoke decorated, and beautiful rooms, and all individual. So I just shook it off and just checked the tray, and then coming out of the room and just completely froze. This freezing thing just went straight through me, and I was absolutely rigid. And then I heard giggling, and at the time I thought it was somebody running the hands down the side of the corridor, and the young girl giggling as it moved away. And I ran, and the door at the bottom, I mean, how I got down those stairs in one piece, I do not know, because I've never gone down a flight of stairs so quickly in my life. And just hit the door and went out. And a bit shaken, and so that the housekeeper kind of lived in the cottages across the way, so I kind of went over and go, I've just seen a ghost, and she came to me and says, silly, come on, and she brought me back, and we went up, and she kind of took me back to the room. It was fine, absolutely fine, no problem at all. And then we checked all the rooms in that section, and we went to the fifth room in the block, which was down at the far end of the corridor, and all the furniture was moved around. And then she went white as well.
Brilliant.
She was the housekeeper. She was the one who checked it. And that she said afterwards, you know, when you're saying it sounded like they were rubbing the hands down the wall, could it have been a bustle and a dress? I said, well, yeah, it could.
Oh,
so that was a big one. That was a big one. And I mean, there's been a few others where I've seen people who I know have passed, and I think it's just memory. There.
Oh.
But I usually hear and feel rather than see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that's
Fantastic.
inspired, having these experiences has pretty much put the spin on the way you write your books?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know there is more there than we understand and that science can explain. There is definitely more there. We don't know. Times overlap, energy hangs around, all sorts of different reasons. I mean, the girl there at the hotel, there's nothing malicious there. I was terrified, but that was because I didn't understand. I think she was just playing a trick. And I did notice actually that once I started looking, the windows would be opening and closing all the time. And then I also understood why, when there was a guest in there on their own and their TV kept playing up and the TV repairman could never find a problem and it kept happening to new TVs, I realised why. She's just having fun. She's just playing. She's playing tricks.
Yep.
Oh, Sandy.
Your experiences give me goosebumps. I've heard a lot of them, and every time the hair on the back of my neck stands up. Well,
sorry, Sandy, you're doing really well to still be with us here. Thank you.
Oh,
she's a good friend, and I keep scaring her with my stories.
Well, you can scare us as many times as you like, Karen, because it's been fascinating. I love,
really good.
love listening to these paranormal experiences. But is there anybody? Before I'm going to wrap it up for tonight so that we can keep going for the next time. Scott, is there any more comments on the chat before we go?
No, it was just Sandy's comment I wanted to put up there. Alison. I'll try to pronounce your name, Alison. All right, but I'm from Glasgow, so if I get it wrong, I do apologise.
Baranowski.
Oh, Alison. We may have worked there at the same time. Yes, there are so many stories at Ripley Castle, and in the castle itself, there's one room that gets an awful lot of people. I can't go more than a step or two into it. If you're in Yorkshire, when we're allowed to travel, if you're visiting Yorkshire, then do have a trip out to Ripley. It's a beautiful village. It really is. It's like a step back in time. The castle's fantastic. The ice cream there is fantastic. They do homemade ice cream, which is fantastic as well.
So you can add that to the square.
That is sweet. Two can Sam and Shelley are so.
Add that to your bucket list.
So
forget the paranormal. That's at the window. It's the ice cream they're going for. You know what I mean?
Me Sam would be sitting in the back of the car like that.
I just said ice cream it.
Just
give me a spoon.
Beaten by ice cream. I mean,
just give me a spoon. I'll be happy.
And sprinkles.
Oh no!
Chocolate dip,
please.
Chocolate
dip, sprinkles, and sauce, and the full shebang.
Yeah.
So I saw the paranormal once. That's terrible, ladies. I thought more commitment than that. But
no.
Ice cream wins every time.
Well, on that note, I think we should wrap it up. And listen, Karen, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been great. It's been a great night. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And to everybody else on the chat, thanks very much for joining and staying in to listen to Karen. It's been a pleasure. And I'll let the boss have the last words.
Thank you so much for having me, and just echo what you said. Thank you everybody who's joined us as well and commented and said hello. It's really touched me and lovely. Thank you ever so much, all of you.
It's been really good, Karen. Thanks once again.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and thanks everybody came in to chat. Karen we are very, very happy to let you know Karen is back with us on the 13th of March. She's teaming up with historian Simon Entwistle, who we all know from, Pendle, Week, etc. Karen and Simon are teaming up to give us their views on our forgotten Pendle.
Really looking forward to that.
Fascinating.
So we are dragging Karen back in.
Kicking and screaming.
Not exactly.
Ice cream. We'll bring her back. We'll promise ice cream.
There'll be ice cream, so she'll be able to definitely be
We'll be there.
Bring ice cream.
big ice cream, a flake. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming in. She comes back with us the 13th of March with Simon Entwistle, which will be really, really good. So don't miss it, please. We're back on Sunday night at 9 p.m. with the Crumbs reunion, the other cast and director writers from the movie The Crumbs. We're getting them all back in to have a good old chinwag. So that's 9 o'clock on Sunday. We can, we'll keep a wee hold you after we come off, though, if that's all right, for a couple of minutes.
Of course.
So thanks. Donna Parker says March 13, she has saved the date. We'll see you then, Donna.
Brilliant.
And everybody else.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Take
Thanks again,
care.
everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Night night.